The polished mahogany table reflected the sterile glow of the overhead lights, a stark contrast to the storm gathering outside the panoramic windows of the penthouse boardroom during an emergency call. I traced the rim of my cooling coffee mug, the hum of the city a distant thrum beneath my feet. My mind, usually a labyrinth of ancient bone structures and historical contexts, felt oddly still. Then, the secure line on the conference phone buzzed, shattering the quiet. "Seth, glad I caught you," the voice on the other end, a senior investigator I'd worked with before, cut straight to it. His tone was clipped, urgent. "We've got a situation at Blackwood Manor. Dr. Alistair Finch. Apparent fall." My grip tightened on the mug. Blackwood Manor. The name alone conjured images of crumbling stone and centuries of forgotten narratives. Alistair Finch was more than just a historian. He was an institution, a specialist in obscure medieval cults and their esoteric practices. Apparent fall? I repeated, the phrase a red flag in my profession. Accidents rarely called for my particular brand of expertise. That's what the initial assessment suggests. Top of the grand staircase, late last night. Head trauma. He was found by the groundskeeper this morning. There was a pause, the kind that spoke volumes. But the local authorities, they're calling it an open and shut case. Tragic accident. I have a gut feeling, Seth. Something about it doesn't sit right. My internal gears began to turn, sifting through the sparse data. Finch, Blackwood Manor, a fall. My work wasn't just about the dead. It was about the stories they told, the echoes left in the earth and on their remains. Accidents, by definition, were usually straightforward, but the investigator knew I specialized in the unstraightforward, in the whispers of history embedded in the smallest details. He knew I could read a scene like an ancient text, deciphering layers of time and circumstance. "I'll be there," I said, already pushing back from the table. My resolve hardened. A gut feeling from a seasoned investigator, especially concerning someone as prominent and historically entrenched as Dr. Finch, was enough for me. The journey to Blackwood Manor was a descent into a different era. The city's steel and glass gave way to rolling hills, then dense, ancient woodlands. The paved roads thinned, eventually becoming a winding gravel track that snaked through trees so old their branches seemed to groan under the weight of history. The sky, bruised purple and gray, pressed down, mirroring the tension that had begun to coil in my chest. I thought of Dr. Finch, his reputation for obsessive research into the manor's shadowed past, his fervent belief that history often held secrets that refused to stay buried. An accidental fall seemed almost too convenient, too neat. As my vehicle finally broke through the tree line, Blackwood Manor loomed into view. Gargoyles with eroded faces leered from cornices, and ivy, thick as a man's arm, clung to its formidable walls. Official vehicles, their emergency lights a silent, pulsing counterpoint to the manor's ancient stillness, were clustered near the main entrance. I parked alongside them, the crunch of gravel under my tires the only sound for a moment. Stepping out, I pulled my investigative kit from the back seat, the familiar way to comfort. The lead investigator, a burly man with a perpetually furrowed brow, met me at the foot of the grand stone steps. "Seth," he greeted, his voice low. "Thanks for coming. It's a scene." He gestured vaguely towards the imposing double doors. "The local coroner's office has already made their preliminary findings. Closed case, they say, but I wanted your eyes on it before anything else happens." I nodded, my gaze sweeping over the manor's facade. Even from this distance, I could feel the weight of its history, a silent observer to countless generations. Inside, the air was heavy, smelling faintly of old wood, dust, and something else. A metallic tang that spoke of recent trauma. At its base, a section of the ornate Persian rug was stained a deep, rusted brown. Crime scene technicians moved with quiet efficiency, documenting, collecting, but their movements lacked the urgency I associated with an active investigation. Landed headfirst, I approached the area, my gaze meticulously cataloging every detail. The rug's fibers, crushed and matted in places, told a silent story of impact. I noted the absence of significant scuff marks on the stairs themselves, the polished wood gleaming under the auxiliary lights the technicians had set up. A simple fall, especially one from such a height, should have left some trace of struggle, some slippage. Then I saw it, near the edge of the stained rug, partially obscured by a fallen velvet rope that had once cordoned off a display, was a minute fragment. It lay on the pale marble floor, not on the rug where the impact had occurred, but slightly to the side, as if dislodged by a secondary force, or perhaps dropped. I knelt, pulling on a pair of nitrile gloves. My magnifying glass brought the fragment into sharp relief. It wasn't wood, nor stone, nor any modern plastic. It had a faint, iridescent sheen, almost like obsidian, but its texture was subtly different, finely layered, almost crystalline. And embedded within its surface, visible only under magnification, was a microscopic speck of a dull, reddish pigment. My mind immediately flashed to the ancient world, to specific techniques and materials used millennia ago for carving and ornamentation. This wasn't something you'd find in a modern manor, nor on the person of a contemporary historian. No matter how immersed in the past, it was anachronistic, out of place, a silent scream of discrepancy. My eyes lifted, sweeping the scene again. The official narrative echoed in my ears. Tragic accident. Alistair Finch hadn't just fallen. He had been part of a narrative far more complex than anyone yet realized, and I had just found the first misplaced comma. The auxiliary lights cast a harsh, unforgiving glow across the grand staircase, illuminating every speck of dust, every minute imperfection in the polished mahogany. My gaze, sharpened by years of sifting through the remnants of lives, moved from the crushed rug fibers to the banister. I ran a gloved hand along the ornate railing, feeling for anomalies. The wood was smooth, undisturbed, save for a faint, almost imperceptible sheen where a hand might have gripped it in desperation. Yet, the pressure points, the natural angles of a body flailing, seemed absent. The scene whispered of impact. Yes, but not the chaotic, uncontrolled descent the initial report suggested. The lead technician, a quiet woman with sharp eyes, watched me from the periphery, ready to follow my lead. I knelt, pulling a fine bristled brush from my kit, and gently swept the edges of the rug. I collected a sample, sealing it in a sterile vial. This was the first thread, thin and easily overlooked, but it snagged my attention. The estate was old, yes, but these fragments felt foreign. My comm unit vibrated, a persistent, urgent pulse against my hip. I ignored it, focusing on the faint impression left in the deep pile of the rug where the head of the deceased historian, Dr. Finch, had allegedly struck. It was too neat, too contained. A fall from such a height down those unforgiving stairs should have left a more violent, sprawling narrative. The comm unit buzzed again, this time with an insistent chime. I sighed, rising slowly. Seth, you need to get to the penthouse boardroom. Now, emergency call. It was the voice of the operations chief, clipped and unyielding. I exchanged a look with the lead technician. Secure everything. Nothing moves until I return. The journey to the city felt like a jarring shift from the hushed, ancient quiet of the estate to the metallic hum of urban life. Traffic crawled, each minute feeling like an hour, the tension coiling tighter in my gut. When I finally stepped out of the elevator into the penthouse boardroom, the air was thick with unspoken pressure. The expansive windows offered a panoramic view of the city glittering under the twilight, but no one was looking out. The operations chief stood at the head of a gleaming obsidian table, flanked by two senior intelligence officers whose faces were grim, their expressions unreadable. Finch's recent activities. It's sensitive. One of the intelligence officers, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and an unnervingly calm demeanor, clicked a remote. The screen shifted to a series of intercepted communications logs, coded but partially decrypted. Dr. Finch was nearing a breakthrough. His research into the ethoid accord was apparently closer to revealing its true nature than we previously understood. These logs suggest he was receiving threats, not just academic disputes, but genuine, credible threats, tied to an organization we've been tracking for some time. My mind raced. An organization? What kind of organization? The chief interjected. One with significant reach, Seth, and a vested interest in certain historical narratives remaining undisturbed. Dr. Finch's work was about to expose a major illicit trade network, not just of artifacts, but of something far more profound. Something that could destabilize several high-level institutions. And the accord? I pressed. It's a key to a forgotten legacy, buried for centuries now being actively exploited. Finch was about to blow the lid off it all. The weight of their words settled on me, cold and heavy. This wasn't just a historian's tragic accident. This was a deliberate act, shielded by layers of influence. The chief's gaze met mine, a silent command. Your initial findings, Seth? Anything that contradicts the official line? Nothing conclusive yet, I stated, unwilling to reveal my nascent suspicions without more evidence. But I'm not finished. I need to examine the remains more thoroughly. Do it? The chief ordered, and be discreet. This isn't just a forensic investigation anymore. It's a matter of national security. The return journey to the estate felt different. The quiet now seemed less serene, more ominous. The knowledge dropped in the boardroom had sharpened my focus, honing it to a razor's edge. This was no longer just about reconstructing a fall. It was about uncovering a lie. Back in the temporary examination area set up in the estate's grand library, chosen for its ample space and minimal historical impact, Dr. Finch's remains lay beneath a sterile sheet. The initial cursory examination by the local authorities had been just that, cursory. They'd seen a fall, a broken neck, and nothing more. I saw a story waiting to be told. My specialized portable X-ray unit hummed to life. I meticulously scanned the victim's skeletal structure, starting with the cervical vertebrae. The fracture at C2 was indeed severe, consistent with a rapid, violent impact. But as I zoomed in, adjusting the contrast, my breath hitched. Microscopic hairline fractures spiderwebbed across the posterior aspects of the vertebral bodies, radiating outwards from the main break. These were compression fractures, yes, but the pattern was wrong. A simple fall, even a severe one, would typically show more anterior lateral stress. The force had come from above, driving the head down into the spine, rather than a whiplash effect from hitting the ground. My gloved fingers moved to the victim's clothing, still carefully laid out on a separate sterile sheet. I took a high magnification lens to the tweed jacket, the wool trousers. The faint crystalline fragments I'd seen on the rug were here too, clinging to the fabric fibers, particularly around the shoulders and back. I used a micro vacuum to collect samples, then examine them under a high-powered microscope. The shimmer was unmistakable. Under magnification, the particles revealed themselves as minute, angular crystals, their facets catching the light with an unusual luminescence. I recognized the geological signature, though I couldn't place it immediately. It wasn't granite dust or limestone, or any common mineral found in the regions surrounding the estate. This was something unique, something foreign to the local geology. The boardroom meeting replayed in my mind. Illicit trade of ancient artifacts. Finch hadn't simply fallen. He had been murdered, and then meticulously placed to stage a fatal accident. The unique dust was a signature, a trace left by his assailant, or perhaps the environment where the initial act had taken place. My suspicions solidified into an unyielding certainty. I had found the first, undeniable proof of foul play, and the path ahead promised to be dangerous. The return journey to the estate felt different. The quiet now seemed less serene, more ominous. Back in the temporary examination space, the air was thick with the faint, metallic tang of disinfectant and the earthy scent of the samples I'd collected. I moved with a renewed urgency, the meticulousness of my work now fueled by a quiet, simmering resolve. I laid out the minute dust particles, barely visible flecks I'd carefully scraped from the victim's shoes and the rough stone of the ledge. Under the powerful magnification of the field microscope, they shimmered like microscopic gemstones. Their crystalline structure was distinct, unlike anything common to the estate. I photographed them, logged their morphology, and then, with a delicate brush, transferred a portion to the sterile vial for immediate analysis by the estate's contracted geology expert. The weight was a taut wire in my chest. Every tick of the clock felt amplified. The response came sooner than I expected. My secure tablet buzzed, displaying a terse summons. The wording itself was a red flag. I secured my workspace, the image of those unusual mineral grains still sharp in my mind, and made my way to the upper levels of the estate. The estate manager, a man whose tailored suit seemed to contain an undercurrent of badly suppressed anxiety, stood beside a large screen displaying geological maps. Across from him sat a severe-looking woman I recognized as the head of the estate's legal department, her expression unreadable. "Seth," the estate manager began, his voice tight, "we've received the preliminary analysis of your samples." The geology expert identified the mineral as a rare form of cinnabar, specifically one with trace elements unique to a remote region in the Carpathian foothills. "It's not indigenous to this estate, or indeed, this country." My gaze sharpened. Cinnabar, a mineral historically significant, often associated with ancient pigments, but also found in specific geological veins. "And how does this relate to Dr. Finch?" I asked, cutting to the chase. The estate manager exchanged a glance with the legal counsel. Dr. Finch, it appears, had become increasingly clandestine in his research. For the past few months, he was poring over old maps, obscure texts. He became obsessed with a particular legend, a lost artifact supposedly buried in that very Carpathian region. Our internal security logs show several unscheduled trips to that area, trips he never formally declared. He gestured to the screen, where a red pin now pulsed on a satellite image marking a crude, almost hidden excavation site. "We believe this is where he was digging. Unsanctioned, of course." A cold certainty settled over me. This wasn't just about a fall. This was about something unearthed, something dangerous. And the research assistant? I'd pressed. The one who worked closely with him. Estranged, we thought. The legal counsel interjected, her voice devoid of warmth. "But our security team located them. They're at the site now, being questioned. We need you there, Seth, immediately. We need to understand what Finch found, and why it led to this." The journey to the Carpathian foothills was a blur of private jets, rugged vehicles, and ever-diminishing comfort. The landscape outside the armored SUV grew wilder, the roads narrowing to little more than rocky tracks. Ancient forests, dense and silent, pressed in on either side, their branches clawing at the overcast sky. The air thinned, carrying the scent of pain and damp earth. This wasn't a place for casual tourism. It was a place where things were hidden. When we finally arrived, the dig site was less an archaeological marvel and more a hastily concealed scar on the earth. A crudely erected tarp provided scant shelter over a shallow, rectangular pit. Tools lay scattered: shovels, picks, brushes, alongside empty ration packs. The only light came from a portable generator humming faintly. Two of the estate's security personnel, hulking figures in tactical gear, stood near a small, makeshift tent. Inside, hunched on a collapsible stool, was the research assistant. They were younger than I expected, their face smudged with dirt and streaked with what looked like dried tears. Their eyes, wide and bloodshot, darted between the security personnel and me. The tension in the small space was palpable, a live wire crackling. Seth. I introduced myself, my voice calm, contrasting with the raw fear emanating from them. I'm here to understand what happened to Dr. Head. The research assistant flinched, pulling their knees tighter to their chest. I don't know anything, they stammered, their voice hoarse. He changed. He got so secretive, always sketching, always whispering about the key. Said he was on the verge of something big, something that would rewrite history. The key, though what? I probed, my gaze steady. They wrung their hands, avoiding my eyes. He wouldn't say, just that he had to be careful. Said there were others interested. Important people. Enigmatic figures, he called them. He had these hushed meetings, late at night, in places I wasn't allowed near. Always with the same 2 or 3 individuals. They weren't academics, Seth. They looked different. An artifact? The assistant hesitated, gnawing on their lip. He called it the Chronos Shard. Said it wasn't just an artifact, but a piece of something much larger. Something that shouldn't be disturbed. A shudder ran through them. He was convinced it was here. That the cinnabar was a sign. But then he went back to the estate alone. Said he had to secure something. And then I think he found it, Seth. He had found something. Something powerful enough to attract dangerous attention. And it had led to his demise. The dust, the dig site, the terrified assistant, it all painted a grim picture. The chilling implication hung in the air, heavy and inescapable. My path was no longer merely investigative. It was a collision course with whatever dark force had orchestrated this. I drove back to the estate, the gravel crunching under the tires like shattered bone. The main house, looming against the bruised morning sky, felt less like a monument to history and more like a mausoleum. My destination, however, was not the grand edifice but the sprawling field behind it, where Finch's last, desperate quest had unfolded. The dig site was a chaotic tableau of disturbed earth, not the precise, gridded squares I was accustomed to, where every shard and speck of soil was meticulously recorded. This was a mess, a hazy gouging of the earth. Shovels lay half buried in fresh mounds, their blades still glistening with damp soil. Tarpaulins, meant to protect delicate finds, were tossed carelessly aside, revealing exposed trench walls already beginning to crumble. It looked less like an archaeological excavation and more like a hurried, desperate scramble. Someone had been here recently, and they hadn't been looking to preserve history. I knelt, running my gloved fingers through a freshly turned pile of earth near the edge of a particularly deep trench. A single distinct boot print, deeper than the others, marred the otherwise uniform texture. It was larger than Finch's usual size, and lacked the fine tread pattern of the estate worker's footwear. This was a heavy-duty boot, designed for rough terrain, not careful archaeological work. My eyes scanned the disturbed area, moving slowly, deliberately. Amidst the chaos of discarded tools and haphazardly exposed strata, something glinted. It wasn't gold or metal, but a dull, iridescent shimmer. I reached for it, my fingers brushing away clinging soil. What I held was a fragment of pottery, no larger than my thumbnail. Its surface was smooth, almost glassy, with a deep, rich indigo glaze that seemed to absorb the light. The clay beneath was surprisingly fine, almost porcelain-like. It was unlike any local earthenware I had ever encountered from this region or period. The estate's history, as far as I knew it, revolved around a specific colonial era, and this piece spoke of an entirely different artisan, a different culture, perhaps even a different continent. It was anachronistic, a misplaced puzzle piece that screamed of illicit import, a foreign intrusion into a meticulously documented local narrative. This wasn't just old. This was wrong. His eyes, already narrowed against the morning light, held a distinct air of weary finality. Just tying up loose ends, I replied, carefully tucking the pottery fragment into a small evidence bag. "There aren't any loose ends. Not anymore," he stated, his voice flat. "The preliminary report from the authorities is in. Accidental fall. Case closed, or as good as." "Accidental?" I pushed myself to my feet, facing him. "With all this," I gestured to the chaotic dig site, the fresh boot prints, the hastily abandoned tools. "This isn't an accident. This is a cover-up." The investigator sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. "Look, I appreciate your thoroughness, but we've got pressure from above. High places, the estate owner, the family. They want this handled quietly. No sensationalism." "Sensationalism?" I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest. "A man is dead, and his work site looks like a badger set after a bomb blast. This isn't about public perception, it's about truth. The truth, as far as we're concerned, is that Finch was old, he was frail, and he slipped. It happened." He eyed the small evidence bag in my hand. "Unless you have something concrete, something undeniable, I'm afraid my hands are tied. This site will be secured, and then it'll be filled in." His words were a dismissal, a clear warning. They wanted me gone. They wanted the dirt buried, literally and figuratively. I left the dig site, the anachronistic pottery fragment a tangible weight in my pocket, a silent testament to the investigator's willful blindness. My phone buzzed insistently as I pulled away from the estate gates. It was my assistant, his voice tight with urgency. "Seth, you need to get back to the lab." "Now, what's happened?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "I can't explain over the phone. Just it's urgent." I diverted my route, the tension in my gut intensifying with every mile. "They just left." "Alas, what for?" "There was a break-in," she explained, leading me down the familiar corridor. "Early this morning. Nothing was taken, Seth. Not the expensive equipment, not the computers, not even the petty cash things were moved. Files, your desk drawers, my forensic lab, my sanctuary of sterile precision, was a scene of calculated disarray. The main entrance, usually secured by a heavy-duty lock, now showed splintered wood around the frame, a clumsy but effective breach. Inside, drawers in my private office had been pulled out, their contents scattered across the floor. Papers lay strewn like fallen leaves. My preliminary analysis of Finch's remains, my notes on the unusual soil composition, the sketches of the impact trajectory, all were splayed open, clearly examined. They hadn't stolen the new microscope, or the chromatography equipment, or the priceless antique instruments I sometimes used for delicate work. They had gone straight for my active case files, for my findings. This was a random burglary. Someone knew I was getting too close. Someone knew what I was looking for, and they were willing to tear apart my world to stop me. The anachronistic pottery fragment, still secure in its evidence bag, felt heavier now, its silent story screaming louder than any shattered lock. The hunt was officially on. The faint scent of ozone still hung in the air, a phantom echo of the intrusion. I stood by my desk, the scattered documents a testament to their careless haste. They hadn't taken the high-value equipment, the sophisticated tools of my trade. They had come for information, specifically my information. The implication was stark. Someone was watching me, and they were interested in what I was discovering about the historian's demise. The sharp, insistent ring of my secure line startled me. Immediately, the voice of the chief of operations was clipped, devoid of pleasantries. There was a tremor in his tone I hadn't heard before, a brittle edge that spoke of genuine alarm. I gathered my notes, tucking the most sensitive ones into a locked drawer. The pottery fragment, the one I'd found near Finch's body, was already secured in a specialized container. I carried it with me, a growing unease settling in my gut. What I'd found was unsettling. The elevator ascended swiftly, the silence broken only by the hum of the machinery. When the doors parted, I stepped into the hushed opulence of the penthouse boardroom. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a long, polished mahogany table. A security consultant, a hulking man with a perpetually grim expression, stood by the far wall, his arms crossed. Their gazes converged on me as I entered. I placed the container holding the fragment carefully on the table, then my notes beside it. "I've completed a preliminary analysis," I began, my voice steady despite the tension in the room. At first glance, it appeared consistent with the period Finch was researching. The glaze, the apparent age, the specific type of clay. But upon closer inspection, under high magnification, I found anomalies. I opened the container, carefully extracting the small, curved shard. I pointed to a minute imperfection on its surface with a sterile probe. Here, a microscopic trace of a modern polymer, almost imperceptible, woven into the matrix of the clay. And the firing temperature, while high, shows a uniformity that suggests a modern kiln, not the variable heat of ancient firing methods. I pause, letting the information sink in. Furthermore, the surface degradation, the pattern of age, it's been artificially accelerated. My spectral analysis indicates specific chemical compounds used to mimic centuries of weathering. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, truly exceptional, designed to perfectly replicate artifacts from a highly specific ancient civilization. one known for its intricate pottery and limited surviving examples. The legal counsel leaned forward, her expression unreadable. It's an incredibly sophisticated forgery, a masterpiece of deception. Whoever created this piece possesses not only immense skill but also a profound, intimate knowledge of the specific ancient techniques, materials, and artistic conventions. It's designed to fool even expert eyes, likely intended for a black market with patrons willing to pay exorbitant sums for what they believe to be unique, authentic pieces. A collective intake of breath rippled around the table. The chief of operations ran a hand over his thinning hair. Then Finch wasn't just researching ancient artifacts. He was likely exposing a high-stakes forgery ring. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Finch's death, the staged accident, the unusual soil. It all coalesced. He had been silenced. He wasn't a mere academic pursuing obscure knowledge. He was a threat, a man on the verge of uncovering a massive criminal enterprise. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. My own safety, previously a distant concern, and now felt uncomfortably immediate. This changes everything, I said, looking from face to face. The motive is no longer a simple dispute over historical interpretation. It's about immense wealth, reputation, and the violent suppression of truth. I left the boardroom with a renewed sense of purpose, the urgent call still echoing in my mind. The image of the forged fragment, a perfect lie, solidified my resolve. I had to go back to Finch's study. My previous search had been through the lens of a historical accident, a scholar's demise. Now I saw it as a crime scene, the lair of a man uncovering dangerous secrets. I made my way to Finch's study, the door still sealed by the security detail. I unlocked it, the click echoing in the quiet room. The air was still heavy with the scent of old paper and dust. I moved methodically, my eyes scanning every surface, every book, every ornament, searching for inconsistencies, for anything a man in Finch's position might have hidden. I ran my hand along the spines of his expansive collection, my fingers tracing the worn leather. Most were academic texts, but one, a thick volume on forgotten cartography, felt subtly out of place. It was slightly recessed, almost imperceptibly, against the back of the shelf. My fingers brushed against a faint seam along the wooden panel behind it. My heart rate quickened. The air within was stale, undisturbed. Inside, nestled amongst the velvet lining, were two items, a slim, encrypted solid-state drive and a rolled parchment. I carefully extracted them. The parchment, however, commanded my immediate attention. I unrolled it gently on Finch's large desk. It wasn't a conventional map. Lines connected specific points, leading to what appeared to be an underground structure not marked on any public record. The symbols were unfamiliar, almost runic and small. Faded annotations in Finch's precise hand were scribbled in the margins, themselves a coded language I didn't immediately recognize. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. This wasn't just a forgery ring. It was something far more intricate, more deeply rooted. The tension in the room was palpable, a silent warning that I had just crossed a line. I found myself back in the penthouse boardroom, the polished mahogany table gleaming under the recessed lights, now devoid of the estate's counsel and the investigating officer. The urgent call, the one that had pulled me away from the detailed analysis of the fragment, still resonated in my skull. The chief curator's voice, tight with barely suppressed panic, describing the anomaly, the perfect, anachronistic lie embedded in a newly acquired piece from a rival estate. It had been a jarring shift from the quiet contemplation of Finch's demise. I hadn't truly left. My mind, rather, had been dragged back here, knowing the resources available. The secure network, the high-speed processors, the isolation. I pulled my specialized laptop from its case, its reinforced gel of familiar weight, and connected it to the boardroom's secure network port. The screen flickered to life, displaying a cascade of diagnostic readouts, a digital heartbeat. My fingers, still smelling faintly of the clay from the fragment, moved with practiced ease. The coded map, carefully photographed from Finch's desk, now filled one half of the display. On the other, the encrypted files I'd copied from his hidden drive. I'd seen enough ciphers in my career to know that Finch's wasn't amateur work. It possessed an elegance, a multi-layered complexity that hinted at a mind both brilliant and paranoid. I started with the map. My custom decryption software, a suite of algorithms I'd spent years refining, began its methodical work. I fed it the known variables, Finch's particular interests, the historical period suggested by the estate itself, the subtle patterns in the lines that seemed to echo ancient script. My gaze narrowed. This wasn't about simply charting historical locations, it was about access. Then came the files. Finch had used a robust, military-grade encryption, but his personal habits, his love for obscure historical facts, had provided the keys. It was a digital breadcrumb trail, intricate and dangerous. The decryption process was slow, agonizingly so, each percentage point feeling like a victory against an unseen adversary. The air in the boardroom grew heavy, charged with the hum of the machines and the intensity of my focus. Finally, the first file yielded. The names listed were not historical figures, but contemporary ones. Prominent industrialists, influential politicians, renowned art dealers. The common thread, immense wealth and a shared interest in the clandestine acquisition of artifacts. Then, the terms began to surface, appearing with chilling regularity. The legacy, the keepers. Not abstract concepts, but capitalized, almost reverential titles. The files spoke of a network, vast and meticulously organized, extending far beyond the isolated estate. This wasn't just about selling a few forged pieces. It was about something far grander, far more insidious. One document, heavily redacted but still legible in parts, detailed transactions involving genuine artifacts, not just copies. Relics of the old world, it called them, preserved from the ravages of history and the ignorance of the masses. The tone was arrogant, possessive. It painted a picture of individuals who saw themselves as custodians, not merely collectors of history. But their method of preservation involved removing items from public record, from academic scrutiny, controlling the very narrative of the past. My gut tightened. This wasn't merely a criminal enterprise, it was an ideological one. Finch hadn't just stumbled upon a forgery ring. He had uncovered a conspiracy that sought to redefine history itself, piece by stolen piece, narrative by manipulated account. The forged fragment, the perfect lie, was merely a symptom, a distraction. The real disease was this network of keepers, hoarding genuine history, shaping it to their own dark ends. They spoke of safeguarding the narrative, of guiding public perception. The names of various historical societies, seemingly reputable, appeared in connection with these messages, implying a deeper infiltration. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking softly beneath me, the glow of the screen illuminating the stark reality of what I had found. He had been too close to exposing the keepers, to revealing their legacy, a legacy built not on preservation, but on control and deception. My previous investigation, focused on the mechanics of his fall, had been a superficial layer. Now, I saw the true depths of the currents that had pulled him under. I had a network, a motive, and a name, the keepers. We have new information. You hear? Now, no details, just the demand. My mind, however, was anything but still. It was a maelstrom of possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. The fragment, a piece of ancient ceramic, had been my anchor, the last tangible link to Dr. Finch's final hours. Its unique composition, the faint trace of an unknown mineral dust embedded within its matrix, had been screaming anachronism, a disruption in the expected narrative. But the call had been unambiguous. Whatever new information they had, it was significant enough to halt my work. I gathered my notes, the precise measurements and spectral analysis reports, feeling suddenly inadequate in the face of an unseen force. I needed context. The physical evidence was one thing, but the human element, the network of secrets and motivations, required a different kind of excavation. Dr. Finch, for all his eccentricities, had been a creature of the academic world. He had mentors, colleagues, rivals. One name kept surfacing in my memory, a retired curator known for his encyclopedic knowledge of antiquity and a notoriously guarded disposition, Professor Alistair Thorne. Finch had often spoken of him with a mixture of reverence and exasperation. If anyone held the keys to Finch's more obscure academic interests, it would be Thorne. The journey to Thorne's residence, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street far from the city's gleaming towers, felt like traveling back in time. The house itself was a testament to a life spent amidst dusty tomes and forgotten histories, a rambling Victorian with bay windows and a perpetually overgrown garden. I pushed the doorbell, the chimes echoing faintly within, and waited. Professor Thorne, my name is Seth. I'm a forensic anthropologist. I was working with Dr. Thorne's brow furrowed, a flicker of suspicion in his gaze. A tragic accident, I heard. His voice was raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I believe it was anything but an accident, Professor, I stated, keeping my voice low, firm. I'm investigating the circumstances of his death. There are discrepancies. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed, stepping back to allow me entry. The interior of the house was a controlled chaos of stacked books, ancient maps unfurled on tables, and artifacts peeking from display cases. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and dust, a comforting aroma to me. What kind of discrepancies? Thorne asked, leading me to a pair of mismatched armchairs in a small study. He settled into one, his posture rigid. The scene, the remains, they tell a different story than a simple fall, I explained, choosing my words carefully. There's evidence of a struggle and a unique mineral dust, unlike anything naturally occurring at the estate, was found on his person and at the fall site. I watched his face for reaction. His eyes narrowed slightly. Finch was a man of many secrets, Seth, more than he let on, even to me. He paused, picking up a small, intricately carved stone from a nearby table, turning it over in his fingers. He often spoke of the keepers. The name hung in yet heavy and loaded. The keepers? I prompted, leaning forward. Thorn set the stone down with a soft click. A society, ancient, powerful, and deeply secretive. They believe themselves the custodians of certain historical truths. Not just knowledge, mind you, but physical artifacts. They're obsessed with controlling archaeological finds, manipulating narratives for political and financial gain. Something they wanted buried. My mind raced, connecting Thorn's words to the fragment, to the anachronistic dust. The mineral dust I found, I said, describing its unusual crystalline structure and faint luminescence under specific light. It's highly distinctive, unlike anything I've encountered. Thorn's eyes, which had been fixed on some distant memory, suddenly focused on me with an intensity that made me hold my breath. That the Blackwood estate? I pressed. What is it? It's a private estate, Seth. Tekude, owned by a family with old money and even older secrets. It's whispered in certain circles that the estate sits atop a vast network of ancient tunnels, a hidden repository for artifacts that the keepers deem too sensitive for public consumption. A private collection, curated not for scholarship, but for power. He shivered slightly, despite the warmth of the room. Finch had been making inquiries about it. Obsessed, he was. Finch hadn't just stumbled upon a conspiracy, he'd been actively investigating it. The unique mineral dust, a signature of the Blackwood estate, had been transferred to him, perhaps during a clandestine visit, perhaps during a violent confrontation. He'd carried the evidence of his killer's origins with him. Why would they kill him? I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. Thorn looked at me, his expression grim. Because he was about to expose them. Be careful, Seth. You're not just chasing a killer, you're digging into a legacy. And the keepers, they protect their legacy with extreme prejudice. I stood, the weight of his words settling on me like a shroud. The tension in the room was palpable, a live current humming between us. The game, I realized, had just escalated. The stale air of the penthouse boardroom hung heavy, thick with the lingering scent of expensive cigar smoke and a metallic tang I couldn't quite place. I traced the edge of the polished mahogany table, my fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface. The city lights twinkled far below, a distant, indifferent tapestry of human activity, and the Blackwood estate, with its ancient, haunted reputation, was merely a front. The real heart of his operation, the informant had revealed, was a private estate, a veritable fortress nestled deep within a secluded valley, a place I'd only heard whispered about in hushed tones. My contact, a nervous archivist who owed me a favor, had risked everything to get me the schematics, a crude digital map highlighting a service entrance, a weakness in Thorn's otherwise impenetrable perimeter. He'd mentioned a pressure-sensitive floor panel and a specific sequence of disarming the laser grid. The risks were astronomical, but the alternative, letting Thorn continue his illicit trade, letting Finch's death remain unanswered, was unthinkable. The drive was long, a winding ascent into the desolate wilderness that isolated Thorn's estate. The paved road gave way to gravel, then to a barely discernible track, hemmed in by ancient, gnarled trees. I parked the vehicle deep within a copse of pines, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. The perimeter fence, topped with motion sensors, was a challenge, but not insurmountable. I disarmed the ground sensors with a device I'd cobbled together, a low hum indicating success. My lock-picking kit, a collection of slender steel instruments, worked swiftly, silently. The door eased open, revealing a narrow, unlit corridor. The air inside was thick with a faint, cloying scent of chemicals, resins, solvents, and something else, something earthy and ancient. I followed the corridor, my specialized flashlight cutting a focused beam through the gloom. The archivist's map had been impeccably accurate. I found the pressure-sensitive panel and stepped over it, then navigated the laser grid, my body contorting into a series of unnatural angles, each movement precise, measured. I pushed through a heavy, padded door, and the true nature of Thorn's enterprise hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was a forgery workshop, state-of-the-art and meticulously organized. Workbenches lined the walls, littered with tools, microscopic chisels, fine-tipped brushes, digital calipers. On another bench, a partially finished Roman bust, crafted from modern resin, awaited its final patination. The air here was even heavier with the smell of chemicals mixed with the acrid tang of heated plastic. I saw vials of powdered pigments, labeled with ancient names: Egyptian blue, Tyrian purple alongside modern synthetic binders. This wasn't just about collecting. It was about creating history, or rather, rewriting it for profit. The sheer audacity, the meticulous detail, was staggering. My gaze swept across the room, searching for the next step. The way to the true trove. The archivist had hinted at a hidden passage concealed behind a false wall. I ran my hand along the cool stone, feeling for an irregularity, a subtle shift in texture. My fingers brushed against a faint seam, almost imperceptible. Beyond it lay the vault. It wasn't just a room. It was a subterranean chamber, reinforced with thick steel and secured by a massive, multi-bolt door. The air within was dry, temperature-controlled, a silent testament to the preciousness of its contents. I used a small, portable scanner, checking for laser grids or tripwires before entering. The vault was a treasure trove, a shocking display of stolen history. Shelves lined with genuine artifacts stretched into the dimness. I moved slowly, reverently, my flashlight beam dancing across the ancient surfaces. There were terracotta warriors, perfectly preserved, their painted details still vibrant. Scrolls, the papyrus brittle with age, lay carefully unrolled in climate-controlled cases. Pottery shards, meticulously pieced together, depicted scenes of forgotten rituals. The sheer scale of it, the blatant disregard for cultural heritage, made my stomach clench. Finch had been right. This was the secret society's hidden trove. A subtle shift in the ambient light, a momentary flicker from the overhead fixtures in the main vault chamber. I froze, my heart rate accelerating. Thorne's advanced security systems. I triggered something. A low, insistent beat began, growing steadily louder. The soft hum became a vibrating thrum. Red indicator lights, previously dormant, began to flash along the vault's ceiling. I cursed under my breath. At new, adrenaline surged through me, sharpening my senses. I snatched a small, intricately carved jade figurine from a nearby display, its cool weight a tangible piece of evidence. The multi-bolt door to the vault began to slide shut, slowly, inexorably. I lunged, my shoulders slamming against the steel as I squeezed through the narrowing gap, the heavy door groaning as it sealed behind me with a final, echoing thud. Footsteps pounded in the corridor outside the hidden passage, growing rapidly louder. I could hear the urgent shouts of security personnel, their voices echoing off the stone walls. I scrambled back through the forgery workshop, knocking over a tray of resin-coated tools in my haste. The emergency exit I'd noted on the archivist's schematics was my only chance of secondary service door leading to the estate's rear grounds. I burst through it, the cool night air welcomed shock against my skin. Alarms blared across the estate, painting the grounds in a frantic, pulsating red. Powerful floodlights snapped on, illuminating the sprawling complex. I could see figures emerging from the main building, armed and moving with purpose. I didn't look back, plunging into the dense undergrowth, the jade figurine clutched tightly in my hand. Thorne knew I was here, and now, the game had truly begun. The city lights twinkled far below, a distant, indifferent glitter. The senior official, his face a mask of practiced neutrality, had finished speaking minutes ago, but his words still echoed. Difficulties. Sensitivities. We need absolute discretion, Seth. Discretion, when every fiber of my being screamed for transparency. The metallic tang, I realized, was the ghost of fear. Mine, perhaps. I pushed away from the table, the scrape of the chair a harsh sound in the sudden quiet. My mind raced, connecting the official's veiled warnings to the unsettling anomalies I'd found at the estate. Finch's death wasn't an accident. It couldn't be. The evidence, though subtle, was piling up, forming a grim narrative. I had to consolidate it, make it undeniable. I need access to a secured workspace, I stated, my voice cutting through the silence. Immediately. And I needed everything relevant from the estate delivered there, under my supervision. No, Dieters? The official nodded, his eyes unreadable. Consider it done. A temporary analysis bay has been prepared for you at the central facility. It's fully equipped. A driver will take you. I didn't wait. The elevator descended too slowly, each floor a tick against the clock. The driver, a silent, watchful presence, navigated the city's streets with practiced ease. My thoughts were a whirlwind of images, the peculiar dust from Finch's clothes, the specific wear patterns on the ancestral stone, the faint, nearly invisible fibers caught on the broken balustrade. Each detail, a thread. The analysis bay was stark, functional. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a clinical glow on the stainless steel surfaces. Within minutes, sealed containers began arriving. My field notes, the photographic evidence, bags of carefully collected trace samples. I tore into them, spreading the contents across a large, illuminated table. This wasn't just about Finch anymore. It was about the keepers, about the illicit trade, about the dark legacy I'd glimpsed beneath the surface of that venerable estate. I started with the photographs, zooming in on every pixel. The angle of Finch's body, the unnatural splay of his limbs, the way his spectacles had fallen. All consistent with a fall, yes, but also with something else, a staged scene. My eyes scanned for the telltale signs, the small scuff mark on the wall above the point of impact, not below. The faint, almost imperceptible drag marks on the floorboards, obscured by the subsequent chaos. These weren't from a struggling man trying to save himself from a fall. These were from someone being moved. Next, the trace evidence. I opened the sealed bags, carefully emptying their contents onto separate slides under a powerful microscope. The anachronistic dust. I'd identified its unique mineral composition, a blend not found naturally in that region, but characteristic of specific ancient sites known for the very artifacts the keepers were rumored to deal in. Now, comparing it to the dust scraped from the soles of Thorne's expensive leather shoes, taken discreetly during my initial visit. A mat, the same fine, ochre-tinted particles. My breath hitched. Thorne had been there. I moved to the fibers. Under magnification, its intricate weave became clear. Not a common fabric. I cross-referenced it with my mental database, then with a specialized digital one. A rare, high-thread count wool dyed with an archaic pigment, consistent with the type of custom-made garments favored by certain exclusive, old money circles. I remembered Thorne's tailored jacket. A quick comparison to a microscopic sample I'd managed to lift from the lapel of his coat earlier confirmed it. Another match. A direct, damning link. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying precision. Thorne, a man of immense influence and power, a man with deep connections to the very history Finch had been researching, was not merely involved. He was at the center. He had been murdered, likely during a struggle, then his body positioned to simulate an accident. The anachronistic dust on Thorne's shoes meant he had been in direct contact with the source of the illicit artifacts, confirming his involvement in the Keeper's network. The fiber on the balustrade placed him at the scene, not as an observer, but as the perpetrator, or at least intimately involved in the act itself. My hands trembled slightly as I organized the evidence, creating a digital presentation. Each slide a meticulously documented fact, each photograph annotated, each microscopic image blown up for clarity. This wasn't conjecture, it was an unassailable forensic case. The motive, too, became starkly clear. Finch, with his meticulous historical research, must have stumbled too close to the Keeper's operation, perhaps even identifying Thorne as a key figure. He became a liability. I was no longer just an anthropologist examining bones. I was a hunter cornering my prey. But the prey was powerful, connected. Presenting this case wouldn't just be a professional duty. It would be an act of war. I would be exposing not just a murderer, but a deeply intentioned conspiracy. I took a deep breath, the metallic tang from the boardroom now a phantom taste on my tongue. I reviewed the final slide, a summary of my findings, the undeniable link between Thorne Finch's murder and the Keeper's conspiracy. It was ready. I was ready. The fight was about to begin. Each detail was a thread, now taut and ready to snap into place. The driver pulled up to a towering glass edifice, its upper floors piercing the twilight sky. I didn't need to be told twice. When the doors hissed open, I stepped onto polished marble. The air in the penthouse boardroom was thick with an unspoken tension, almost palpable. A long, gleaming table dominated the room, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. I also recognized the estate manager nervously adjusting his tie in a corner chair. Thorne was not present, but his shadow loomed large. I walked to the table, placing my reinforced evidence case in the center. The financier's eyes followed my every move, sharp and calculating. He was a man accustomed to control, to shaping narratives. Tonight, I intended to shatter his. Thank you all for convening on such short notice, I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline humming beneath my skin. My investigation into Dr. Finch's death has reached a critical juncture. The financier's expression remained unreadable, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Dr. Finch was not simply researching the estate's history, I continued, opening my case. Inside, a series of magnified photographs lay arranged. He was on the verge of exposing a network, the Keepers, involved in the illicit trade of ancient artifacts. Artifacts, I might add, that derive from this very estate's hidden past. I pushed a photo across the table. It showed a microscopic image of a unique, granular dust. This, gentlemen, is a specific blend of limestone and mineral silica found embedded in the fibers of Dr. Finch's clothing. It matches the composition of the ancestral stone, the one I examined myself, which was disturbed recently. Not by age, but by force. I pointed to another image, a close-up of a faint, linear abrasion on Finch's wrist. And this, I said, my gaze sweeping across the faces in the room, landing momentarily on the financier, is consistent with the friction of a thin, strong cord. Finch was restrained, not to prevent escape, but to position him. To ensure his fall looked accidental, the estate manager cleared his throat, but the lead investigator silenced him with a sharp glance. The anachronistic details were the key. I pressed on, my voice gaining momentum. Finch had been in contact with something significant, something hidden, shortly before his death. Something he wasn't supposed to find. I leaned forward, my voice dropping slightly. forcing them to listen more intently. Finch wasn't just a historian, he was a gatekeeper of truth. Proof that could tie it to Thorn. The financier's composure finally cracked. Preposterous, he scoffed, his voice low and guttural. You have no direct evidence linking Thorn to any such conspiracy. On the contrary, I countered, sliding another photograph across the table. My team found this less than 24 hours ago. A hidden chamber, accessible only through a concealed mechanism. Inside, we found the remnants of a recently disturbed cache and, more importantly, a ledger. A ledger detailing transactions, dates, and names. Names that point directly to Thorn, and to this very boardroom, as the nerve center of the keepers. The financier's chair scraped back as he stood abruptly. You overstep your bounds, anthropologist. This is a smear campaign, a baseless accusation. It's forensic evidence, I stated, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. And the ledger details the sale of artifacts, including one specific item, a sarcophagus fragment that matches the unique pigment found under Finch's nails. He died trying to expose you. The financier took a step back, his eyes darting towards the door, then to the windows. The lead investigator signaled the officers, who subtly shifted their positions, blocking the exits. He underestimated Dr. Finch's tenacity, and he underestimated the power of the smallest anachronistic detail. The truth, like these ancient artifacts, has a way of resurfacing. The financier's face contorted, a primal rage flickering in his eyes. He lunged, not for me, but for the table, sweeping his arm across it, sending photographs and my evidence case clattering to the floor. You will regret this, he roared, his voice echoing in the polished room. His eyes, now wild, locked onto the panoramic windows. The lead investigator moved, but the financier was already in motion, a desperate dash towards the penthouse exit, clearly intending to flee. The chase had begun. My evidence case lay splayed open on the Persian rug, its contents photographs of the historian's wounds, schematics of the estate, magnified images of anachronistic tool marks scattered like fallen leaves. The financier stood frozen, his chest heaving, his wild eyes fixed on me, a man whose carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time. You will regret this, he repeated, but the conviction had drained from his voice, replaced by a hollow echo of desperation. I did not flinch. I regret nothing, especially not when it comes to uncovering justice for the dead. I gestured to the scattered evidence. This isn't just my work. It's the truth, meticulously documented, irrefutable. Before he could respond, the heavy boardroom doors swung open. The lead detective, his expression grim and unyielding, stepped in, flanked by two uniformed officers. Their presence was a cold, hard counterpoint to the financier's fading fury. The detective's gaze swept over the disarray, then settled on the financier, who seemed to shrink under the scrutiny. Mr. Thorn, the detective stated, his voice low and authoritative, we have warrants for your arrest and for immediate searches of your properties, including the estate and your various holdings. He nodded to the officers. Take him. The financier's face went slack, all fight draining from him. He offered no resistance as the officers moved in, their movement sufficient and practiced. As they led him away, his eyes met mine one last time. He was a man utterly broken, his empire already crumbling around him. The subsequent days were a whirlwind of activity, a relentless storm of investigation and revelation. My scattered evidence from the boardroom provided the critical impetus. The photographs, once dismissed as circumstantial, now served as blueprints for the authorities. Warrants were executed with surgical precision. The initial raid on the estate unearthed a hidden passage beneath the study, leading to an underground bunker, a meticulously maintained repository where centuries of stolen artifacts lay hidden. The sheer volume was staggering. Scrolls, statuettes, ceremonial weapons, all dating back to periods far predating their supposed origins, all bearing the subtle, anachronistic marks I'd identified. Other raids followed. Here, more artifacts were recovered, along with detailed ledgers and correspondence, a meticulous record of illicit transactions spanning generations. These documents explicitly named the keepers, outlining their hierarchical structure, their methods of acquisition, and their ultimate goal, the systematic rewriting of history to suit their own distorted narrative. The public exposure was explosive. News channels broadcast images of the recovered artifacts, juxtaposed with mugshots of the financier and his known associates. Historians, archaeologists, and cultural heritage experts appeared on every screen, their voices a mix of outrage and awe. My name, once confined to academic journals, was now mentioned with a mix of respect and curiosity. The adrenaline that had fueled me for weeks had dissipated, leaving behind a profound exhaustion that settled deep in my bones. The case files, once my constant companions, were now neatly bound, relegated to a shelf. I ran a hand over my tired face. The truth, when it finally emerged, was often brutal, leaving scars not just on the perpetrators, but on those who unearthed it. I had chased this truth relentlessly, driven by a scientific curiosity and a deep-seated belief in justice for the voiceless. But the cost, the constant vigilance, the threats, the proximity to such deep-seated malice, it had taken its toll. There was a strange, almost unsettling satisfaction in seeing justice served, in knowing that the historian's memory had been honored, his true fate revealed. The world was a little less murky now, a small corner of its forgotten history reclaimed. But the experience had also changed me. The ivory tower of academia, once my sanctuary, now felt too confining, too detached from the raw, dangerous edges of reality where my skills seemed most needed. I looked out my window at the city's skyline, a sprawling tapestry of old and new. The world was full of secrets, of obscured histories, of those who would bury the truth for their own gain. My forensic anthropology, once a tool for understanding ancient cultures, had become a weapon against modern deception. I had walked into a dangerous game, and I had emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, more aware. The thought of returning to a purely academic life, while tempting in its safety, now felt like a retreat. My resolve hardened. The pursuit of truth, I realized, was not just my profession. It was my purpose, a relentless, vital undertaking, no matter the danger it entailed.